Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining me on this rather chilly Thursday night here in West Texas. For those of you who are new, my name is Pete. I'm the roaming prepper, and it looks like I got a bunch of my usual gang here. I've got two quite interesting gentlemen, one you've met before, one you have not. Hello, Loretta and Teresa, and let's see who else has joined us. Cold War prepper. Thank you, sir. Another military guy here in Texas. He had a great video earlier today. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, Neil. Hello, Neil. How are you? Royal Lioness. What's going on? Currently not capable of interacting with nice people. Okay, yeah. No, that's fine. We're all having a week this week, I'm sure. Hey, Scott, how have you been? And let's see, who else did we get? Loretta, I think I said hi to you just now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we, oh, hey, Ghost Lincoln, hello. And Hunter. And who else is here? Mr. Morgan, hello, hello. Hi, Lisa, welcome, welcome. All right, folks. Well, I just wanted to say hello to a few of y'all while we were in the chats. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have two rather interesting fellows today. One, like I said, you've met before. So I will introduce to you Texas Redleg. Now, you guys all know he's got a YouTube channel. And the other gentleman that we have here is getting situated is Ed from Rebel Intel. So, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the conversation. And gentlemen, thank you both for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So when we originally had this conversation, it was probably just around the holidays, and we rescheduled a few times. And the last 3 weeks have been tumultuous, to say the least. So I want to touch on some of that, but I'd like everyone to be introduced to your channel. So if you guys want, take a couple of minutes and tell us about yourselves, what you feel comfortable saying, a little bit about your background and what your channel kind of focuses on.
Go ahead, Ed. Go ahead and start.
All right. Hey, guys. My name is Ed, and I currently work at a Fortune 500 company as what we call a senior investigator in anti-money laundering, or I call it AML. It's a Special Investigations Unit, or SIU. It's currently a team of 8. The company employs about 36,000 people. There's about 1,000 in our AML compliance department. Now I've cleared it with the HR and they know all about this. They're not very concerned, but I'm not going to throw out my full name out there just yet, but you can call me Ed. My first name is Ed and I go by Rebel Intel, and that's on TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, and YouTube primarily. And a 35,000 foot high level overview, I've either been in military, law enforcement, intelligence, Middle East analysis. I used to be an Arabic linguist as well, homeland security studies, anti-money laundering, or AML spaces for about 31 years. I've got combat deployment to Desert Storm as a Marine, and an OIF deployment 2007, 2008 as Army intelligence. And then I went straight into Gitmo for 30 months of operations at JTF Gitmo with our guests there. So I've been doing this a while. I do have a bachelor's degree in intelligence and security studies, and a whole bunch of other certificates on those spaces. Now, I go for the big fish. I like to talk about mafias, cartels, transnational criminal organizations. I like to promote individual agency and information literacy and evaluating your sources so you don't get duped by fake news or anything that's going too crazy or too viral. I like to talk about spotting and hopefully preventing elder abuse or exploitation, like those fraud patterns. Things like that is what I'm getting into more and more. And I'm also, you can't get into those things without also inadvertently, as it would be, sliding into geopolitics, international relations, socioeconomics, homeland security, and everything else like that. So that's primarily what I to push and post about on my social medias.
Cool deal, man. And that's, I mean, this gentleman and I, we ran into each other on another platform, and we've been chatting back and forth. I mean, the content, I think both of these guys do is great. Texas Redleg, let everyone know who you are. A few of them know you, a few of them don't. So
Yeah, thanks again for having us, Pete. So my background is also military. 4 years in field artillery. I was in a 8-inch nuclear unit in Germany during the end of the Cold War. When our unit deactivated due to the agreement, the status of forces agreement, and the new, I guess, international agreement with the former Soviet Union, there was supposed to be no land-based nukes in Europe. So our unit deactivated. Some people went to other units, and I was due for reenlistment anyway. So I reenlisted and went to Army CID, which is the felony investigation branch of the Army, like NCIS. General crimes all the way through, crimes against persons to even some undercover drug work with the German police. So I ended up doing 4 years in CID, and then went on to the civilian world, and I ended up going to a major insurance carrier where I worked fraud investigations, SIU, as Ed mentioned, but for a major U.S. carrier. I did that for about 4 years, and then sort of gravitated towards the back up with my insurance time. I did a lot of arson work and arson investigations, suspicious claims, and sort of gravitated from there to the engineering world, the forensic engineering world, where I've been pretty much ever since. And I do a lot of building forensics. I do construction defect cases where we basically go in and we investigate through destructive testing and such, who messed the building up, who did this, who's responsible, who needs to pay, and where I also do some fire origin and cause work. So basically fire and explosion investigations. So that's pretty much it for me, without going into too much further detail. But, my channel is basically just sort of gravitates towards security, I would say, personal security. A lot of the stuff I don't do a whole lot anymore. I'm just really busy, and I don't want to just do a video to throw a video out. So I watch a lot of other videos, a lot of other channels, if I have something, I think that's valuable to add to what's going on at the moment, I'll throw a video out there. But I generally, most recently, haven't done too many videos. I just depends on what's going on. But anyway, that's me.
cool, gentlemen. That's a heck of a resume for both these guys. So we're going to get into, I didn't know where to start. We have so many hot spots, both internationally and domestically, that I wasn't sure what direction to start with. So I actually figured we'd start in the order of which all these things had occurred. So let's talk about the first issue we had, which started, geez, has it been over a year already? Ukraine, I
2
guess.
years. Over
No,
2.
2 years, you're right. How will this situation develop? This is becoming basically a war of attrition at this juncture. It's, I guess, who can outspend who. Gentlemen, what are your takes on that? I'll let you guys decide who wants to chime in first. Where will this go in the next, say, 6 months?
I personally think that, and I don't want to be labeled a conspiracy theorist, but, I think this is a hell of a money laundering operation, number one. Number two, I think that with the weapons that are being, weapon systems that are being used over there, some being from us and other European countries, on both sides, actually, weapons movement and usage, I think we're getting a pretty good assessment on what works on the other side and what doesn't, and so, I think both sides are doing that, obviously, but I think there's some, penetration testing and other stuff like that going on, obviously, too, real time, right? So I know there's a lot of intel gathering going on, and it's certainly not good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I work on the money laundering side. We don't see anything on that side, but what I can add to that I found interesting is that the current White House administration was adamantly opposed to an Office of Inspector General who would be overseeing the funds and stuff going into the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty interesting point. My wife was just trying to call me, sorry. But, they have an OIG with the State Department. They have an OIG with the USAID, but we don't know where that money's going. And there's already been reports as well saying the private contractors are making a killing out there. Well, what are they doing? Well, they're probably doing a lot of private military corporation type stuff, but who's overseeing all that money? And not to mention, and I don't get into politics too much. I don't like most politicians, but it is a fact that basically Joe Biden's about 1 degree of separation from organized crime himself. His family referred to him as Daddy Warbucks, and they used to make money with that side of the family with the uncles during World War I and World War II. So I thought it was interesting when he wanted to pull the troops out of Afghanistan, even before Donald Trump got in. He wanted he kept trying to push Obama for a complete withdrawal out of Afghanistan. And then it seemed like a lot of engineering to get into Ukraine. And why that shift? Well, we had an OIG watching all that money for all that military equipment out there. And we don't have it in Ukraine. So I think that's going on. And like Redleg said, a lot of testing, probing, checking of gear. We're seeing all this stuff get rehearsed and put out in the field. So that's one of the things that's definitely going on.
So to that point, do you think that I guess the industrial congressional military complex is in full effect at this juncture with that whole European situation going on?
I think so. I mean, why wouldn't they? It's worked great so far.
Yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's a shell game. If it's not in one location, it's another. And so to be clear with everybody, it's like I'm kind of divided on the issue because in some ways I feel like I don't want to bite the hand that used to feed me because I was in the military and I did a year as a contractor as well. But while the things are going on a little bit that we can see a little bit more transparency, and that's my main concern and complaint is I want transparency. I want to know what exactly the budget is, where everything is going, and some kind of goalpost. I mean, what's the end game here? And that's a lot of the complaints that we've heard from the Republican side saying, what's the end game here? So they just shifted from, being in Afghanistan almost over 10 years, about 10 years after they got bin Laden in a whole other country, doing nation building, which the U.S. military isn't really set up for. As you see, we didn't do that Marshall Plan like Japan and Germany.
No, we did not.
We tried that, and we left that Afghanistan and Iraq, both of those countries, a complete shit show. It's gonna keep reflecting on us because we're in a unipolar world, whether people like it or not. The U.S. is the sole basic global power. It's not even a superpower anymore. They're calling it the global power. And if we can't have a free and fair election here without some election interference or something going on, how are we going to try to persuade people in other cultures that don't even like any government of man, and that they're voting is foreign to them, and they see all this corruption? How are we going to influence them to try to be above board?
That's a very good point. And of course we've gone and provoked one of the other nuclear powers in our expansion. I actually have heard from some of the guys who are in OIF and wound up in Kandahar and up in the mountains there that there's reports there are Chinese troops now protecting some Chinese mining interests. So does that surprise either of you guys at all?
Not at all.
No, I
It
don't.
would, it's kind of, yeah, if actually saw the report, I'd have to look at it. But we know that the Chinese Uyghurs were active through that area because some of the um, Osama bin Laden bodyguards and his crew ended up in Gitmo. Most of them have been not released, but transferred to host nations. But the Uyghurs were going around, kind of sort of like what we consider the jihad tour with those Pashtuns. They go around through the north to get into the Kashmir. So if they're going to hang out with some of the Uyghurs, especially with the Arab Mujahideen post-Soviet occupation, it wouldn't surprise me if Chinese and maybe even Chinese private military corporations and security contractors were in there safeguarding Chinese interests, because I know they're interested in various resources throughout the world.
Yeah.
No
I think you've
doubt.
got a huge conglomerate of what we call spooks in that area that are documenting, recording everything. This is real world stuff that you can, build a nice portfolio on, and it might help you down the road or help you, exploit somebody or otherwise. But yeah, I agree.
And they left if there's any activity out there, we should be able to collect on it, even leaving Afghanistan or Iraq, but especially Afghanistan. I heard we left like thousands, if not tens of thousands of mass sent devices, basically mostly disguised as rocks and stuff out in the mountains and the streets everywhere.
Sad.
Yeah, whole cam type stuff.
So,
Mhm.
do you think, as far as the Ukraine-Russia situation going to Europe, do you think that's going to expand going into this year? You think they're just going to continue to grind on each other in this, demented proxy war? What are your thoughts on that?
What do you think, Redleg?
I don't know. I think it comes down to vulnerabilities and inventory, if you will. I think that with what I'm hearing and many of you hear is that the Russians are depleting resources pretty fast. However, they're trying to backfill with other munitions from other friendly nations to them, if you will. But um, I I don't really see I don't see it expanding kinetically, honestly. I think if it's going to come here or if it's going to go anywhere past, the Polish Ukrainian border or north, that it's probably going to be lit up pretty good. I don't think that, I mean, I don't think Europe would be that hard to take, by the Russians, but um, I don't think anybody wants to get bogged down into a guerrilla war when you've already got resources that are depleted. I think that, I mean, if it were me and I was going to pull something like that, I would pretty much decimate whatever it was ahead of time, where it was an easy walk for me, whether it's an EMP or something like that. I mean, I wouldn't want to naturally just destroy all the resources because I might need them, but if I can put you in the dark and put you on your knees without really firing a shot or getting a soldier killed, it's kind of same mission accomplished, right?
Yeah,
At least soften the masses where you can waltz on in.
I agree with
That's
that
good.
for the most part too. But it's interesting that Putin didn't opt for any type of asymmetric or limited interaction there or actions there. He went just straight in. What bothers me the most is about the situation is the posture. Like, I guess the way we seem to be getting information in the US at the start, because it seemed like the media, which is, in my opinion, basically being played by the government agencies, was trying to tell us, don't worry, Putin's not going to invade. But now we've come to find out the intel was telling them the most likely course of action for Putin was that he's going to go invade.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're telling you one thing about that, the next thing you know, Biden is making this move and he's shuffling slowly. He should have went in faster and harder sooner to try to prevent that. But it seems like they let it simmer specifically to engineer it or almost like manufacture it into this situation. Now we've got, what is it, over 500,000 killed, about 300,000 Russians, 200,000 or so Ukrainians. And NATO is one of those countries, I'll have to look at the report again, but it's one of those countries, or NATO itself, basically telling people to prepare for wars. And that could be them fear mongering as well, but they could be worried about some of the potential Islamic elements in there that were kind of sort of with Wagner Group and other Russian elements fighting against the Ukrainians, because Russia has this weird relationship with Islamic fundamentalists and extremists, and they have a really hardcore special forces type group, beyond Spetsnaz. They're not an anti-terrorist group. They were, from the beginning, when it was still the Soviet Union, they were a terrorist group. They were supposed to go in there and basically be terrorists and make things look like it was terrorism. So we could be seeing NATO worry, or at least fearmonger about that. Maybe it's to get people a little bit more prepared, but I hate it when we get those kind of alarms.
And it's interesting because not every country in Europe is aligned with NATO at all. Hungary, was it No, Slovak Republic, Hungary, Moldova. It's a little reminiscent of 1914, 1913, where you have nations with alliances around nations who are with the other alliance. And I guess it's going to be one of those wait and see situations where we see how it expands. I hope Redleg's right and that saner mind prevails, and someone's looking to make a deal at some point in the next year, kind of settle this down, but you never know.
I mean,
But
I think
go ahead.
too is the fact that we're not only us, but the Germans and some of the other European nations, we're shipping tanks through there and getting them across the border. Well, I'm sure they're going by rail. And why is Russia even allowing them to get on the battlefield? Right. I mean, you got Bradleys, M1s now. You've got these Leopard tanks. I mean, it's not that hard to start whacking rail lines and preventing equipment from getting into a nation. Okay. I mean, that's one of the benefits.
That would be to Ed's point, that would be a great use of an extremist group that's already in Europe. Is okay, I'm going to give you guys $2 million, go and screw up this railroad so we don't get more tanks in Ukraine. I mean,
if Russia is so good, I'm not saying they're not a formidable opponent, but why are they even allowing these, vehicles and weapon systems to get into the country?
Yeah.
I think it's a plausible question to ask why that's happening. It's not like we're better at logistics than anybody else.
No, those are valid points.
I'm just kind of throwing it out there as something to think about. That's all.
So what about the Israeli conflict? It almost looks like Russia wanted a distraction from Ukraine to kind of suck some more of our gear out of there. And so they went and, because if you look at the Hamas attack, and this is just my take, tactically, it was a really brilliant attack. The paragliders and the motorcycles, it was almost reminiscent of the Mumbai attack. It was actually very well executed, but did they actually think they were going to hold that ground when the IDF came rolling in? What was the end game there?
I can tell you
your
about
thoughts on that.
I can tell you about that, because I was hoping that would be a place where I could make posts with a little bit more traction on the TikTok, but TikTok has shadow banned most of that stuff because people apparently on TikTok that aren't pro-Palestinian anyway, aren't like super hardcore anti-Israeli or whatever, which is neither here nor there to me because I only report the facts. They don't like it when anybody talks about Israel or Palestine. And I've been studying this for a long time. Two of my Arabic instructors were Palestinian. And there's quite a few articles on this. Some of them are peer reviewed. Hamas has been playing this game with this kind of like back and forth tit for tat with Israel for like 30 years now. Now we know it goes back to 48 when Israel was created. For a long time, I thought Palestine was basically de facto created at the same time, but it wasn't. It's to a lot of places still not a recognized state. But Israel's a recognized modern nation state by most countries. Its passport can get them almost anywhere. The Palestinians feel trapped. They feel like they've had their land taken from them. And the reason the Arabs, the other Arab states like Egypt and Jordan and stuff won't let them in, it's not, it's like they're softly supporting the resistance by saying you have to stay over there because you have a right to live on your land. And that's how we're going to support you. And Hamas, for over 30 years, has been playing, we're going to strike you and do something. And we're hoping that you overreact. So you get this international crisis, and both of these groups put together are still less than like 1 or 2% of the global population. They're a very small part of the population, but they're getting all this world attention and all this money. It's another potential waste, fraud, and abuse money laundering scenario. We've seen networks, entire networks of activity terminating in specific areas of Palestine where, number one, it's a lot of material support, mostly money. And if they're in, especially if they're in America and they're sending money to Palestine or Yemen, I guarantee you they're less than 1 degree of separation from an entire network that can, some part or node of that network can be conclusively linked to terrorist financing. You got all that going on. Hamas knew what was going to happen. They knew it was going to be 2008 Operation Cast Lead times at least 2. And somebody is financing their public relations, because tens of thousands of people all over the world don't just get together and say, hey, all of a sudden we need to be anti-Israeli and go march. Somebody is funding it and organizing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, those are good points. And again, that it's interesting you bring up the follow the money, because it seems to be both conflict zones we just talked about. There's a lot of funding flowing, and we don't necessarily know where all the funding is going. So that's actually a rather interesting take on that. So do you think, that being the case, do you think this is going to expand? Do you think this will uh, simmer down in the next 6 months? I mean, because Israel's going to run out of things to destroy. They're on the war path right now, and they're blowing through the northern half of Gaza, and they're going to go south. As you pointed out, Egypt doesn't want that, so they've designated like an area where the people go. So, what are y'all's thoughts? Is this gonna, at the same time, is that gonna spawn something here in light of people who may already be in this country who are sympathetic? Do you? Because political strife is one thing. When you get into these old religious conflicts, people are willing to die for that stuff. So what are your takes on, is this going to spawn back on us domestically somehow?
I mean, I think that it's obviously a dangerous game, right? Because, I mean, many people have said it that, Israel doesn't have anywhere else to go. Okay. And to be honest with you, they don't really have that many friends. I mean, we're a friend when we need to be for political gain and otherwise. But I really don't think that we're that good a friend to Israel. I think um, they're in self-preservation mode. Do I agree with everything Israel's done? No. I think that it's pretty evident that their enemies, their direct enemies geographically, don't want them there. And it goes back to, biblical times and whatnot. So it's a lot of this is foreshadowed, I think, if you tend to believe that sort of thing. But I think that, Iran I think the minute that they actually procure a hot one, that I think, or if they can get their hands on two, I really think that, us and Israel will probably be receiving something in some form or fashion. So in my opinion, I think that as soon as Israel finds out that that's the case, I think they're going to have to make a move. I think, I'm not saying it would be successful, but I mean, at this point, when your enemy shows you who they are and they repeatedly show you over and over, I think that you got to believe them at some point, right? So they don't really have anywhere to go. And again, I'm not taking Israel's side. I don't agree with everything they've done. I'm just saying that they don't have a lot of options, in my opinion. And of course, they never cop to saying that they're a nuclear power or they're not. But I think it's a dangerous game. I think that there is such vitriol against them from so many entities. And we know what happens when we get military, vessels and weapon systems in an area so confined. Mistakes happen all the time.
Yeah.
And it may not take very much. And I think us even letting the Houthis breathe air at this point is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
This could have all be ended. This could have all been done by now, in my opinion.
Well, is it? I mean, we know it's already expanded because we got the Houthis way south in
This is
the
true.
Arabian Peninsula in Yemen doing what they're doing. They've struck all the way out pretty far into the Indian Ocean on a couple of Indian vessels, and India's upset now. But those missiles apparently aren't really doing much but cosmetic damage. But it's still the intent and the posturing and the fact that they're supported by Iran, and there's the whole Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, Syria, those basically almost like the axis of evil. Now, is this going to be another group that was like the previous Venezuela, Libya, and Iraq
No.
and others that we smashed before? Was Biden hoping something like this would happen so we could test our marine littoral forces? But in the region, I think it's possibly going to expand more because we know Israel's going to go up in the north.
Yeah.
And we know, like somebody said, Israel's not blameless. Israel has a policy that they started with the Lebanese war in 2006 that they call the Dahia doctrine. And Dahia is Arabic for, it's two things. It's literally suburb, but it's a specific name of a suburb of Beirut that is now mostly Hezbollah. Hezbollah controls that neighborhood and most of South Lebanon. And they're a military force and a serious political force now because they have tens of thousands of people supporting them, and their support was waning over the years with that Bashar al-Assad thing, as Hezbollah would go across into Syria to support him, and Hezbollah and ISIS were fighting each other. And a lot of Hezbollah the bodies were coming back headless. These guys are serious. You can watch the videos on YouTube. Nasrallah chants to them, you need to chant Labaik Ya Zainab, Labaik Ya Hussein. When your son comes back headless, know he's in paradise, and he fought the good fight. Basically, these guys are die hard. They're the same as the Houthis. It is reportedly IRGC and or Hezbollah that's helping the Houthis. Israel isn't going to back off of this, and they're probably going to expand it. They've pulled out a little bit of some parts of Gaza, but as we're watching this, they're pivoting to the north, and they're starting to hit Hezbollah. U.S. is going in there. We're basically actively engaged. We're striking because Iran, we got to counter-strike Iran. They're hitting us in Iraq and Jordan and Syria, or maybe not Jordan. They won't try Jordan because they know King Hussein, and we have forces in Saudi Arabia. Those two countries
Do not like Iran.
Jordan, they're not going to touch. Syria and Iraq, they're probably going to try to touch those guys. We're going to have to counterstrike like we already have.
And, to your point, there's an ancient dislike between the Saudis and the Jordanians and the Iranians, I guess the Persian Arabic cultures, the Sunni Shiites. So that may be something Iran just doesn't want to mess with at the moment either.
Well, they're picking a fight with Pakistan. They lobbed how many cruise missiles in on them? That's pretty
This is true.
Nuke power.
Yeah.
We know Pakistan has nukes.
Yeah, so that's an interesting scenario too, because they're both striking the same region on the border. It's sort of like the AfPak region with the Pashtuns. You got the Pashtuns in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. They want their own autonomous country, but they'll probably never get it. There, you got the Baluchis down in Iran and Pakistan. We've still got one of the HVTs in Gitmo was Amr el Baluchi. He was like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's like #2 dude. He's still in Gitmo. Those guys are going to die in Gitmo. They're never going to get out. Delman, probably, I think there's about 20 or 30 left that the other countries don't even want them. The Yemenis, we'd watch the Yemeni delegation come in. We don't want these guys. I don't even know who they released them or transferred them to. But you got the Iran-Pakistan situation. There's another situation with Pakistan. Pakistan is packed with people that, and culturally, I don't mean to upset anybody that may be culturally diverse and sensitive, but I've worked with these guys. Part of my time, I was a linguist manager of like 90 linguists in Gitmo. Most were Arabic, but there were some Pashtuns, some Urdu, Dari, etc. Culturally, everybody in that whole area is very revenge motivated. It's honorific culture, even among the Israelis. And if you strike a little bit here, 1,000 years later, they can strike you 10 times as bad. So it's, Afghan area, they call it Badal. And they are a martyrdom culture, and they're into victimhood mindset. They don't take responsibility for their own stuff. They have scholars come out of Pakistan, and the only thing they do is blame everything. All their problems are on either the U.S. or other external foreign influences. Solve your own problems. If you think we're creating your problems, kick us out. But you got to set your house in order and stop complaining about everybody else.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know what else? It kind of makes me think, how many billions and billions have been dumped into the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah.
Raped by Hamas. But how many power plants do you think they could have built by now and have their own power generation?
Oh,
that place could be a paradise. They could have that place like a summer resort.
Right.
Well, you look at Dubai isn't very big geographically, and they invested everything in infrastructure and solar and water treatment, and their goal was to be the banking and business mecca of the Middle East, and they've accomplished it. Yeah, I guess by that same token, to your point, Ed, they could have done better with the money that was given.
Dubai, another money laundering center, sort of like Miami and Panama. You can just look in the town and see the buildings, and that's drug money.
Well, and talking about the Houthis now, you kind of led me into that next question. So, from a preparedness standpoint, all of us are sitting here, most of us are in the West. Either we got some folks in the UK, some in Australia, New Zealand. For the most part, we're Canada, US in the chat. How will this affect us over the next year? Because China, India having to reroute around the Horn of Africa, that's a problem. That's logistically a nightmare, and it's expensive. So, gents, what are your thoughts? How is this going to affect us? Will it kind of level off when everything adjusts? What are your thoughts on that? There's a little more of an economic question on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Ed.
Well, I don't think it's going to level off for a while, because when COVID hit, I read some articles that said when COVID hit, we still hadn't fully recovered from the 2008 situation. And now you're talking about China and India and other on the rise BRICS level power. They're going to be economic powerhouses because they just have the manpower, so to speak, the population. They can generate the GDP and the GNP that they need. And now we've got another situation, and they haven't recovered from COVID. I mean, COVID hit India and China hard. So it's amazing to me. I'm wondering if that's not part of the reason that Russia couldn't go in and take care of Ukraine a little bit quicker, or if Putin literally wanted to drag this out for some of the same reasons, just make it more of a long game. I don't see that can be a logical course of action for him, because he's lost so many personnel, manpower wise. But economically, with everything that's going on, we're looking at another pushback of 5 to 10 years for everything to level out, I think.
So you think it'll be almost a midterm to a long-term economic hurt. We're just maybe not feeling it quite yet. What about you, Red Leg?
I think, it's about conditioning, right? I think that there was a trial run and cope with COVID, and they see how people reacted. They dumped some stimulus in there, and um, it's definitely killed a lot of business. It's expanded the government's footprint, if you will, and I think they are playing the long game, and
Yeah.
I think it's all about eventually wiping out most of the middle class. And I think there's a lot of people that probably agree with that.
Good point.
I'm not an economics major, that's for sure. But I understand that China's in a pretty bad way economically right now, like on the verge of collapse, is what I've heard. I don't know that to be a fact. I'm just regurgitating what I've heard, but um, it's going to be interesting to see if people have learned, on, again, this comes back to prepping and whatnot. I mean, I'm like you gentlemen, and many others, I've probably been prepping for 10 or 12 years now,
Yeah.
seriously. Right.
Yeah.
But how many people have felt enough pain? Or do they wait too long? Are they just going to be a victim with their hands out, feed me? I mean, I go to the store every week, and I'm at the point now where, since I've prepped so well, that I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I feel pretty comfortable about where I'm at, and I can value shop. So I don't have to pay this or that for a certain material. If it's not of value, if it's not good
Right.
use of dollars, I'm probably not
Yeah.
going to buy it. Whereas, or the early days, I might have bit the bullet. Like when, no pun intended, 22 bullets were in short supply. I didn't have a whole lot. So yeah, I bought a brick and took it in the rear end on that deal. But I've since learned from that mistake, and I've always maintenance bought since that time. I think it was 2010 is when that sort of happened
Yeah.
and went down.
Yeah.
So I've learned from that, and I've insulated myself against that reoccurring. And so hopefully people have learned. And I want to ramble on here, but pain educates people, right?
Yeah.
So
No, that's a good point. So yeah, if you know something that may be affected, now might be a good time to get your hands on it before the pricing ripple gets through the supply chain.
and I don't know about anybody listening or in the chat, but my inventory around where I live is huge. There is so much product that they're throwing good stuff on the clearance aisle just to move it because they're
Yeah.
running out of space.
Yeah, we got plenty of supplies in Texas.
Yeah.
Cold War Prepper, I think is his name, asked about central bank crypto.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it's going, but it's not going anywhere. Eventually, crypto is going to get regulated. It, I I don't know about terrorist financing, but I know that some of that stuff in that movie about the child exploitation. Forgot the
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. I watched that. A little bit Hollywood, especially the end. Some of it's realistic, but a lot of human trafficking, lot of narcotics trafficking, and a lot of child exploitation. The U.S. is the number one consumer of that stuff. A lot of funds go to third world countries like Thailand and the Philippines. Philippines has been fighting it for a while, so it may not be as bad in the Philippines anymore. But once it's there, then they're converting it to crypto. So I do know crypto is linked to that type of transnational crime. And everything that we've been talking about, in my opinion, one mafia or another is running the whole thing, because the mafias, a lot of mafia personnel have basically legitimized themselves by being integrated in a variety of legit stuff. They're in colleges, the government, regular jobs, and everything else like that. So there's part of it that's legit, but they're also operating that dark world, and part of it ends up happening to be sometimes going to funding terrorism. You don't want an actual state to do something stupid, so That's what your CIA type of elements in foreign intelligence organizations do, is they outsource it to useful idiots. You got traveling companions and useful idiots. There's always somebody out there that's so poor they're going to be a useful idiot. Like those guys that were just released by that judge who said, hey, these guys were set up, basically. I'm wondering how that's going to pan out for the Minnesota situation with those guys. And
Yeah.
I'm not into that right wing kind of stuff, like those boogaloos and such. But how much of it is actual intentional doing something like that, and how much of it is spurred on by some kind of law enforcement agency?
A DA or an investigator wants to make a name for themselves, get that next promotion.
Those are sexy cases to try.
Yeah. It's an excuse to throw some schmuck, as they'd say, under the bus. Because who would fight for them? How long have those guys been in jail now? 9 years, the ones you mentioned, something like that.
A couple of them are 9, yeah.
What
10,
matters
12.
and get a grand jury to bite off on, however you skew it. The damage is already done. Okay, so they're not convicted. Well, you've already impugned that person, to a certain extent. They can never work again. Typically, the damage is always done prior to,
Yeah. At the very least, they're going to have to move or something.
Yeah.
We're talking economically and prepping wise. I made a recent post too, warning about what they're considering stockpiling. Now, that's not illegal, and that's not what they're getting busted for. I think there's some states that have some limits, especially on ammo. I don't know what those limits are, but somebody in New York apparently was caught with an illegal amount. As far as I know, most other jurisdictions, there's no illegal amount. But to that point, there's an economy hit. There's people feeling pressured. They want to stockpile this or that. They might get busted for something as small as DUI or domestic violence. But the part of the headline is going to read, when they served the search warrant on the house, the person was found to be stockpiling. So it's going to hit your reputation more.
Yeah.
And why? Doubt. Because we got all these global conflicts and everybody's getting scared.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring it domestically, because we're talking about a lot of international stuff that will affect us here, being that all of us are in Texas. And I know this one's going to be an exciting issue. So I think all of us have talked about Governor Abbott's statement back to the feds that he posted. So will Texas force a deal? Do you think he's trying to just cause a big public scene? Or do you think it's going to be a showdown? There are 3 convoys right now of truckers headed to Texas and Arizona in a show of support to secure the border. And they're coming as far as California, New York State, and Tennessee. And another one's forming here in San Angelo. So a lot of citizens are getting riled up now. So, gentlemen, what do you think? They're forcing a deal? Is it he's trying to force a president's hand, or do you think it might continue to ratchet up?
Go ahead, Ed.
Well, I think if the current administration would have been reasonable to begin with, we wouldn't have to see it come to this level. It was like Texas was almost painted into a corner, and it's just as bad, if not worse, in some parts of Arizona, from what I hear. So I was born in New Mexico. I've been on the border my whole life, or in a border state my whole life, except when I was, deployed. I haven't seen it this bad in a while. And, don't freak out and, set your hair on fire and run around like a, chicken with your head cut off. But we have a lot of serious issues on the border. And I don't think some of these issues are that damn hard to figure out. You have the best analysts in the world that can do deep dive data pools and look at your data and give you advice on what you guys should do. And there's reasonable steps and measures that could have been taken to ensure safety and security on the border.
I totally agree. And I think, by Abbott, sharing the wealth, if you will, with shipping some of these, or providing transport for some of these immigrants at their request, to these other jurisdictions, particularly sanctuary cities and states, he has no other choice than to do that, because if you have no skin in the game, if you don't if you don't reap the pain that comes with a fully exposed open border, it's out of sight, out of mind, right? So I think we either have a sovereign state or we don't, and unfortunately we're the closest border to anybody coming up north, so obviously they're going to take the shortest route they can, so we get the majority of the infiltrators here. At the end of the day, I think that take take common sense and sympathy out of it, because I think there's an end game here. I think the feds, I don't want to give them too much credit, okay, I really don't, but I think they've got ulterior motives to this thing. I think that if they can link Texas to the MAGA movement, if you will, as hyperbole to further expound on the Jan 6 people, they're trying to link all that together as insurrectionists, and well, they won't follow federal law, and they won't this or they won't do that. They're anti-government. Well, okay, but at the end of the day, who is going to insulate the state of Texas from open borders? And I don't think we have a choice. I think that we need all the support we can get. I think naturally, Texas has always had an independent streak due to our history. And we're just looking for a reason to secede. I mean, I know it's not that easy, right? We would probably be attacked. I think that's, without question, if it were to really happen. So it's a mess. I'm hoping for the best, but I don't have a very good feeling about it. I really don't.
And I think also, we don't know who's already here. I mean, what was it, 30,000 folks, and they guesstimated 8,000 gotaways or slipped-aways, whatever they were calling them. I may have my numbers screwed up.
That could be weekly or something.
And yeah, and you think about it, the 9/11 attacks, formally speaking, was what, 13 guys in the air, maybe another dozen on the ground providing logistical support, money, apartments, cars, until they were trained up and they executed. What could 20 instead of 25 guys? What about 250 or 500? In multiple states at multiple locations all at one time. I mean, even if the actual damage is minimal, the appearance, the freak out that would occur would be pretty bad. So, gentlemen, what do you think folks should take away from this discussion as they go about their day? Obviously, don't panic, like you said, don't set your hair on fire. But instead, let's think, what should you be doing? What should you be alert to? Or how should you be preparing oneself? So just a couple of comments on that, and then we'll open up to a couple of questions.
I personally think that, as your preps continue, your mindset should be, how can I be most independent as a person, as a family? What can I do to decrease my worries about, the government giving me anything or controlling anything in my life? I think if you can insulate yourself from governmental action, the better off you're going to be.
That's a fair point. Ed, what about you?
Yeah, at first, I don't think the invasion USA type scenario is the most likely course of action, because there's a lot of the ethnicities of those people already working here, and this is their bread and butter, and they don't want to end up becoming targets themselves.
That's a good point.
We've got a lot of issues, and some of our issues we can look at right here in the state, because we need to insulate ourselves, I think, from demand reduction. Like, before the fentanyl even gets in here, stop the demand somehow. Not the drug demand reduction has been a failed plan in the past. I used to work on that. You do sock hops at the high school. You do the just say no type stuff. Somehow, some way, it's not working. And I don't know if it's because America has enough time and money, but like to Redleg's point, if if we can make ourselves whole, start with your individual self, and I don't care how you do it. Pray to Jesus, get that strength, but make yourself whole. Take care of yourself first, and take care of your home and your family, and make sure your information is good before you launch into anything. Maybe wasting your time and energy. Just kind of like focus, because we got a lot of people that are spinning off the railways. They're getting too spun up. They're wrapped around the axle. We got too many problems right here in the U.S. And these guys in the Holy Lands and everywhere else, they're going to fight. Let's let them fight. We got some forces over there. Let's try to get them back. My big thing with that, don't spend our money. Don't use hardly any of our troops over there. Get those guys back, because we can use that money. We can use those troops here, secure the border. But to close out and curtly, I guess, focus on yourself and family first.
That's good points. And always stay on budget, look for the best deal, all that 101 growing up thing that they probably don't teach the kids enough anymore. But in any
Right.
case, we'll open to the floor, see if anybody in the chat has any remaining questions, or if they but gentlemen, I got to thank you both for your time. It's been a month. I can't believe 2024 started like this. I thought it was going to be quiet for a few months anyway, and that's proven to be wrong.
No, we knew 2024 was going to be crazy.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
agree.
Well,
So real quick on the border, I think, regardless of, if the election goes one way, I would say the better way, hopefully. I don't think we're going to immediately what needs to happen is the entire border needs to be secured with United States active duty troops, I think. And I know that's, getting into posse comitatus and all that stuff, but I think that unless you fully militarize the border, I just don't see I don't see this becoming effective, especially in the eyes of the people coming. And I agree. Hey, if I was not from here, I'd probably want to come here too,
yeah,
But everybody, you know, just because you have a pulse and breathe air doesn't mean you get to come to America. That's
yeah,
my personal opinion. And I understand why. I get it, but you know, life ain't fair, and sometimes you get the short end of the stick, and that's all you get.
yeah.
And that goes all the way around. And that goes for me too.
No, I
Yep.
agree with you 100%. I did get a question, Captain Carl. Does the panel think China will move soon on Taiwan? We didn't touch the Asia Pac, so what are your thoughts on that?
Why
I
wouldn't
don't
they?
know.
I mean, I don't
Yeah,
think we're thinking about it.
I don't think Z has enough going for him right now. I think they're going to continue just putting on the economic sanctions and other posturing. It's not unless Taiwan completely just says, "Hey, we're independent," that China's most likely course of action will be something. But there's another point about Taiwan that I haven't hardly heard anybody touch on, is they've got somewhere around, I think, 50,000 members of their Taiwan Chinese triads there, and they're aligned with the CCP. So China has a lot of options to really hurt Taiwan without direct military involvement. And there's a lot of hard options for China that if they did direct military action, they would most likely come out of that very hurt one way or the other, because it's only if they actually take direct military action on China, the U.S. policy, I believe, according to our national security strategy, will be to intervene militarily, and then China's not up for that.
I don't know. I mean, I think, yeah, obviously, if you can take down a nation without military involvement, that's the better option, right? But I don't. I don't know. I don't really know enough about the situation to really offer a serious opinion, but I know that the more we get stretched thin, the more options China has. You know, if we're not in the area of operations with anything robust, I mean, what does it really matter?
That's true. We still do have I believe it's the Ronald Reagan in Yokosuka, and some of our military forces there. We did pivot we're bolstering in Guam and the Philippines as we speak. We've been doing that for a while, specifically because of China.
Oh yeah. And
So it's not like I'm wondering if the situation isn't like the same thing what they said with like Putin. Oh no, they're just going on war exercises and maneuvers. No, he meant to invade the whole time.
Yeah.
And is there anybody that's gonna? My question is there anybody that's gonna push that button specifically to play that shell game where, okay, now that we know the world's been watching over here for so long and they're catching on, oh, now it's China, Taiwan in the mafia military industrial complex game.
Yeah. That's a good point. And to your point, before Ukraine was attacked, how many times in the previous year and a half did they demob? They kept going back and forth on the border with large, and all of a sudden they just kept going one time. And that's what China's doing, flying around ships. You never know which one's going to be the sleight of hand. So, gentlemen, it looks like we don't have any more questions. So, what I'm going to do, I know your time's valuable, and I appreciate you guys spending it with me. I'm going to wrap this one up. If you guys can hang on, I'm going to do the closing video, and then we can chat backstage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. Again, we've posted the links for Rebel Intel and Texas Red Leg. Please go check them out. These guys are great to talk to. They're great to collaborate with. So, folks, you guys be safe. God bless. Godspeed, gentlemen. I'll see you backstage.
Thanks for
And we will see you all later.
Thanks for having me, y'all.